This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry.
What's happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another special edition of the Post Shift Shot. This today is with Ian Tostenson from BCRFA, the Restaurant and Food Services Association here in BC. Just talking about what BCRFA has been doing in the market, trying to get the government plugged in and seeing what they're sort of working on a long-term plan. It was a really good chat, lots of information. Again, I'm just trying to download as much stuff into everybody's heads as I possibly can. So I hope you gain value from this. Hope you enjoy this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed all this week. It's been a great week this week. I'll chat to you soon, guys. Keep your heads up, and if you need me, just drop me a message. Bye.
So what I'm trying to do right now is I've been doing the podcast for about 15 months. And with all this sort of thing happening, with all the initiatives and all the associations doing so much right now in Canada, I'm trying to tape a podcast a day, which is a ton of work. But I'm just trying to get as much information out there because I feel when I talk directly with the associations like yourself, it's a little bit more focused and true instead of every single website being posted on social media or on multiple pages and everybody going nuts over certain things and misinformation and all this sort of craziness. Like I've heard absolutely everything.
Yeah, totally. And that's the biggest challenge right now is to center information, factual information, and then the business community can make the appropriate decisions. But and that's exactly what our objective is to get very targeted on this. So here's the tool, here's how you use it. If it's not working, then we'll take it back and get it adjusted. Because that uncertainty right now, especially in the restaurant industry, is brutal, right?
Yeah, I did a live stream yesterday with Trevor Bird from Fable. I talked to Jeff from Able BC earlier this week.
That was a good interview.
Oh, thank you very much. It's always interesting because I feel like the hospitality industry is always sort of connected, especially these days when you've got social media and everything. I'm sure you have the same thing as I do as you go to a show or a conference, and there's so many people I put it in the commas, but you've never actually met face to face. And so you sort of walk through a conference going, I know you, but I don't think I've ever introduced myself. So it's nice to sort of get a nice candor going straight away, which I think you can sometimes be a hit and miss. I've been lucky enough. I don't think I've ever had a hit and miss one. But so what I want to sort of do is how about you introduce yourself and sort of explain pre-COVID, which is very interesting, what the BCRFA does.
Okay. Well, thanks, Shawn. Hang on a second. Let's just go back here and drop my. First of all, is the sound quality all right, Shawn?
Oh, it's perfect. It's good, and I can make it work.
Okay. So, Shawn, thanks very much. Ian Tostenson here. I'm the CEO of the British Columbia Restaurant and Food Services Association. The organization's been around over 40 years. It really has evolved. It's been through a lot with industry. And I think the defining purpose for us right now is to be an organization that's rich in very relevant resources and support as this industry faces its worst crisis in its history. And, the abundance of information, I wouldn't want to be a small business person in this market right now, having to go to a government website or any website, frankly, and try to sort out what is and what isn't. Even when we sort out the information, the execution of it is sometimes, it doesn't work. It's just like the government is announcing things, and we'll take it and we'll translate it, and then the person goes to activate it, and they'll come back and say something like, gee, that $40,000 loan that I was supposed to be able to get, it actually didn't work, so I've only been open for 5 months, like those technical things. So they don't have time to be chasing that stuff. That's our job. Our job is to chase the stuff, find it, get it to them, and work with them to try to, do basically three things: is protect where they're at today, make sure that we put enough into their businesses that they can have a chance to reopen. The third part is the reopening. So we're working in all those fronts with government. And it's a real test of the organization. And I think so far so good. We've taken BCRFA.com and made it a resource center for people to go, so they can, instead of chasing around to go into different sources, they can go to BCRFA.com and get the latest and breaking. And then at the end of the day, everybody gets an email recapping what's going on. So far so good. Yesterday, Shawn, we did through Gordon Foods, we did 100 restaurants webinar. And we put together a very tight presentation for them, which is I'm happy to share with you when we get off this call. But it directs everybody on, again, the programs to for relief for our industry.
What's the general? Now, I've obviously I'm talking to a lot of people, but you're sort of tapped right in there. What's the general vibe from restaurateurs? Is there panic? Is it sort of very emotional, or is some of them sort of focusing in on the business, on how to make it better for themselves right here, right now?
Yeah. So contextually, there's 190,000 workers in the restaurant industry across 15,000 restaurants, and they were all ordered to close. So right away, you're probably looking at unemployed numbers north of 170,000 people. And a lot of businesses are now doing takeout and delivery and being very innovative around that space. But it's not that revenue isn't enough to make great differences, but it does provide some cash and it does provide some employment. So you're seeing about 10% of the industry already has shut their doors and said we're not coming back. And they probably would have shut their doors anyways. Another 20% of the industry is saying we're not sure it's going to be worth it, and we might just sort of fold our cards. So potentially you could see 25% loss of restaurant units in British Columbia before we go. That's substantial. But I think, as you know, Shawn, that the economics of a restaurant are marginal at best. They run about a 4% before tax profit. And they've had an awful lot of red tape and taxation on them over the last several years, with increasing minimum wages and employer health tax and property taxes and, just everything around them. It just compressed the margin. So when you have this crisis, there's no power. There's no ammunition left in the gun for them to do anything. So they're, in answer to your question, it's a crisis and they're scared. And because we don't know the way out of this thing, we don't know whether it's in a month or we don't know whether it's 6 months. If it's 6 months, we have a big problem in our hands.
Do you think I have my own views and talking to general people, I think 12 weeks still with the lockdown is definitely on the table, but the bounce back is going to be this time next year before we start seeing a real return to true form, to true normality.
Yeah, and that's a consumer confidence thing. And you remember back in 2008, that was a financial crisis. This is a health crisis. There's still lots of money in the system. I know that it's going to cost a pile of money to do this. But you're right. I think it's a question of when you get the all clear signal, are you sure? It's going to be, I don't know. I'm now kind of nested into my food delivery at my house. We were able to work with Able BC and Jeff and ourselves to get the government to do alcohol delivery now with food delivery, which helps. And that's a tribute to the government, how quickly they work. But we're changing social patterns here. We're working out of our homes now. So you sort of question office space and you sort of go, you can have restaurant parties on Zoom. So there's a whole bunch of things here that have been maybe so disrupting, Shawn, that the contraction of the industry is necessary to be what it eventually will be. I think a lot of people will do a combination of things versus as where we came from. Only a month ago, right? A month ago, we were flooded with restaurants and going out for lunch. I think that's going to be, to your point, it's going to be a while to restore that to whatever level the new level of normal.
Do you think the current state with online ordering and takeout and delivery was an inevitability for the industry in the next 2 to 5 years, with consumer convenience being paramount right now? Do you think, I've heard a lot of restaurants before this sort of pushing back on Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats and stuff like that, which I understand why from a pure financial point of view with the fees and stuff. But consumer convenience can't be denied. And I think, do you feel like it's pushed a lot of restaurants that have been sort of trying to hold back onto the past sort of mentality into the future much faster than what it would have if we kept to some normalcy? This would have happened 2 to 5 years' time.
Yeah, the home delivery model was increasing over 20% annually, so it was getting traction. My own personal views on why that is, I just think that it was, suddenly now the array of offerings was expanded. It is not cheap. I mean, you pay even as a consumer, by the time you pay delivery and tip and stuff, but it's a convenience factor. It's also the fact that I could actually have a nice meal and enjoy a couple glasses of wine and not worry about driving or being caught somewhere. I did feel that, and we took a really strong stance to get ride sharing into British Columbia and soon to be hopefully in Victoria. That would really help that. And I think it will a bit, but I just think, it's like the world of Netflix. Order your White Spot, Joey, Earl's, whatever, or hopefully your local restaurant down the street, to hang out and have some people over. It's a pretty compelling proposition, and I think you're right. I think this has advanced that whole the model now. What we're seeing, just sort of to what your point is, we're seeing commissaries now popping up where people are developing their own brands, like Shawn's Burgers. Shawn's Gourmet Burgers available exclusively, right, with special sauce. And you haven't done the commissary, you get a delivery company and you're in business.
Yeah. So with talking about like brick and mortar stores and stuff, are you speaking through the government, or are you sort of being a bigger voice for landlords, or restaurants speaking to landlords and landlords coming on board and finding a happy medium? And I think insurance companies, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about right now, is another aspect, because I know a lot of restaurants who have had disruption in service insurance, and the insurance companies are saying, no, you're still doing takeout. You don't get any payout if you're still doing takeout. Are you sort of pushing the government, or pushing as a voice or an association for landlords to come to a happy medium with the tenants?
Yeah, I mean, it's each one of those leasing agreements are so individual, and it's hard to. And then, of course, you get into the whole thing about the landlord probably has a mortgage and he has maintenance, and so it's really messy. All we can do is what we worked here is for industry to early in the game get to your landlord and tell them exactly what your situation is, give them some advance warning. And then on the other side, it becomes a liquidity issue, is with no money in the bank, the government is now flowing money through. So I think the $40,000 loan that was announced was designed to help that. So they go to the bank, it's guaranteed. You can get the cash to help you through, the next couple of months for your lease pay or your rental. The problem is it needs to be adjusted because it only qualifies businesses of a payroll of $1 million. And so we're trying to go back to the government and say, change that quickly, and make sure when you tell the small business guy that goes into his bank to get the $40,000 that it's almost immediate. It's not like, well, we'll get back in a couple of weeks and check on the creditworthiness. So that's the angle we're working on that. And the other angle, of course, the government did a good job, I think, immediately with the adjustments they did on the EI program for laid off workers, and also on the program even for contract workers to access $2,000 a month. Every business owner that I've talked to, the first thing they said when this hit is a lot of them were almost in tears, and they said, I just want to make sure my employees are taken care of. That was the very first thing they did. So now it's now the focus that we have with government, provincially and federally, but more provincially, is trying or making sure they understand the gravity of the situation. that we were the first ones to go down. The incredible employment attached to this. And if you look at hotels and pubs and restaurants, you're looking at 250,000 people in the province. And so how do we get this back up? And a lot of it's going to be liquidity. A lot of it is I need to pay bills now. I need to pay bills that I had going into this thing, which will be your food suppliers. And then it's going to be, I need money to buy food. So there's a whole lot of things that we have to help figure out here. And, if we don't do that, if the government doesn't do that for industry, the casualties will be massive because there's no cash. I mean,
Do you think the government? Sorry, you go. Keep going.
No. Well, then I guess I think they're going to have an awful lot of empty buildings that used to be restaurants, right? And probably no one to rent it. So the cascading effect is what we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah, I've had a few people, like I've mentioned that landlords and restaurateurs and operators need to work together. And people are like, oh, screw the landlords, they're going to get a bailout from the government. And I'm like, well, no, we're all in this together. Like it's a dropping a rock in the middle of a pond. It gets bigger and bigger and wider as it drops out. And I think, what's your opinion on? Do you think the government is really beginning to understand just how impactful and absolutely behemoth the industry of hospitality is, in the way of how many people are employed? I feel like sometimes, and you can probably speak to this, I feel like sometimes the numbers that come out of what the hospitality employs and all this sort of stuff isn't including the student who's in the university working 3 dishwasher shifts every 2 weeks to support himself or herself. Do you think the government's starting to understand and realize just how big our industry is on a sheer volume of people employed in it and money being made by it?
Yeah, it's, a month ago, I think we all took these things for granted. Yeah. We've been talking to government about gonna back off on all these fees and taxes and then going up and up and up. And they go, yeah. And for some reason, I think government sort of felt that business, any government, has the capacity and the economy is strong and they have the capacity to pay for these things. Now, I think the stark reality is when you look at, that's my estimate, but I don't know how it could be any less than 170,000 people overnight lost their jobs. And you're right, they're students. There's a lot of youth in that, anyways. About 25% of our workforce is youth. In 1 out of 5 cases, it's a person's first job. And so the entry point with restaurants, suddenly you go, wow, these guys are a really important industry. And not only that, but as you know, these servers, even though they're getting EI, that's a fraction what they were actually making. When they take into account gratuities, that's another big problem. So even though we say our workers are getting EI, they're not making gratuities. And that gratuity was, helping them do tuition and helping them do all those extra things in expensive cities like Victoria and Vancouver. So even for social reasons, you want to restore that to the best you possibly can, because I don't know where you're going to ever find those kinds of jobs for people in the future if that whole sector was to significantly collapse. And it's not just here. I mean, it's everywhere. You look at the devastation in the United States. I think the restaurant industry, the president was saying, was the second largest employer in the U.S. next to the U.S. government. Wow. So, and he's had all the restaurant brand owners into the White House trying to figure it out because of the impacts. And, it cascades into our local wine industry. And we were on the phone this morning with craft beer guys in BC that basically were making draft beer. They're out of business right now. And our local food supply, because restaurants were highlight that the whole local movement, which is going to become even more important. So, for the I think there is a portion, Shawn, of the industry that needed to be clipped. Unfortunately, there's some people in this business that probably shouldn't be there. They got in for the wrong reasons. I know there's a business that opened in Vancouver. And they were a beautiful family from Iran, but they opened a restaurant because it was part of their immigration responsibilities, and they had to invest $400,000 in hiring people. And I tried so hard. I really, really love these people. I thought I tried to convince them, do another model. This is too risky. No. My mom's got the great recipes. Well, they're out. And she texted me, I guess, last week and said, where do we get help? And I'm thinking it's gone, right? So that's where you don't want to be. What you want to be is good operators that understand how to purchase, understand disciplines and ratios, and get into the business and provide a great social experience, because, you know, the kitchens of a lot of condo owners in high density cities like Vancouver are restaurants.
Uh-huh.
You go down from the condo and go to a restaurant and eat your dinner.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
Do you think this is going to give to try and find a silver lining? I've talked to a few people about this one, to give a bit of a silver lining on the rebound. Do you think this is going to reset the industry to a degree and sort of repopulate our staffing pool, especially in the chef's category, with these closures? And hopefully, if people come back to the industry, do you think it's going to reset the industry to a degree? In pretty much every facet I've heard from Able BC, some of the legislation that's coming down the pipeline, do you think it's going to give us sort of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back reset to the industry in BC?
Yeah, I think just in life will be reset on the way we approach things. I think our value systems are going to be reset. And I was caught up with like anybody else. I mean, you know, only 4 weeks ago, everybody's living the high life, right? There was no stopping it, and the issues we're dealing with were marginal in comparison. And now it's so serious, as you say. So we're going to come back with quality businesses that are stable, that are going to be a lot more bulletproof. We're going to be looking at governments now that are not going to be so inclined to start doing, I don't want to say goofy things, because some people object to this. Very important things, but doing it in goofy ways. Like, you know, we spent weeks in Victoria talking about the plastic bag ban, for example, was a good thing. But then there was this whole thing about deposits and then drive-thrus, and with government officials say, well, just use your own bag in the drive-thru. Like, that kind of thinking is like, hello? And how trivial are those things now compared to that business maybe gone now? So all that reset is going to be healthy. There's going to be casualties, but I think it will regenerate itself in a much better way, in a much more, everything is so jerry-rigged. You know, industries were, and different governments keep sort of piling on different, regulations and approaches to business. I think that's going to be really suspect right now. I mean, can you imagine the government saying, okay, well, we're going to just get back and resume on the employer health tax and get back up on the minimum wage, and let's bring back the carbon tax. And people go, hang on a second. I'm in so much debt right now, and I'm trying to get out of that. And now we're going to get into that. So there's going to be a reset for sure. But I think that naturally, this reset will probably be taking more responsibility for the things that government's trying to do. Like, we'll probably, you know, everybody's going, well, look at the environment. It's like healing because we're not driving around so much. Those sort of things, I think, will have, will have a real profound effect.
Do you think with going to the tourism sort of sector, I always personally feel, and you may correct me on this one, I always feel like your DMOs, your tourism marketing organizations and stuff, hospitality and restaurants and bars are always like a red-headed stepchild. It's always about the hotels. It's always about the cruise ships. It's always about the big, tangible, chunky portions of tourism. And hospitality is always sort of like, I know a number of DMOs that don't have a hospitality or a food and beverage chair. Like, they have 3 chairs for hotels and a chair for the cruise ship terminal, but then no hospitality chair. Do you think that restaurants and bars now are definitely being plugged heavier into the tourism model? Because, especially Vancouver and Victoria, where restaurants are sort of if the cruise ships get you there, the hotels put you up, restaurants are the lifeblood of those two things. Do you think it's going to change a lot of people's perceptions in the tourism industry?
Yeah, but I kind of understand where you're going with this one. I think the restaurant industry will now reset itself into more of the domestic market. And I think it'll serve its own intra-tourism. I think that's for the next little while. We'll be traveling around British Columbia when we can and supporting each other. And then I think what will happen is instead of having reliance, like I remember when we were in Victoria, this was hitting, and remember the conversation was about, well, the cruise ships, yeah, they've had some problems, but they should be back by July. And I'm going, that was like 5 weeks ago we were saying that. They're not coming back, I don't think, for probably, well, the point was is that so many of the businesses in Victoria relying on those cruise ships. They're built for that business, right? So you take that business away, those businesses go away, and then they'll reformulate around whatever the demand is for the domestic audience. And then as tourism, which I think will take several years to get back, then they'll start to develop our industry again. But it's going to contract. There's no reliance on tourism. I mean, who's going to travel the next year? From a global perspective.
So do you think that's going to change you? We've talked about consumerism and stuff. Do you think that overall, because I feel like a lot of the times we as an industry get into our little social media bubble, like because social media is consumer facing, everything we see is sort of reassuring us and propping us up on what we're what we're doing is correct and that sort of thing. But in the grand scheme of things, do you think consumer and guest education on the struggles of the hospitality industry that we're having right now, do you think that's going to become a bigger portion of actual education for a lot of these people who dine in restaurants but don't really know the economics of restaurants and bars?
Yeah, and we are very prolific in the media, and our strategy has always been don't be complainers and whiners and leave that stuff in the background and deal with government, because we're hospitality and we are very adept at getting through situations, which we are, because this is thousands of entrepreneurs who do a great job of what they do. The problem is now it's exposed, right? We expose everything. We expose the small margins now. It's believable. Public are going to start seeing places closing because they said, boy, they don't have any cash. There's no staying power. And banks aren't particularly fun. We don't find us fun to lend to. And they I've talked to everybody who said, oh, my daughter worked there, or my son works there, or their friend worked there. And then what? They all worked in a restaurant. They don't have a job anymore. So totally the public is going to be much more aware of those economics of the restaurant industry. I think it was taken for granted. But I never felt you wanted to hear us on CFAX radio bitching and complaining about our poor margins. We go, seriously? How can they have poor margins? They're selling a bottle of wine for $40 and the steak was $45, It doesn't make sense to the consumer, but now I think they understand what the problem was a bit more.
Well, yeah, I've talked about restaurateurs and people in the industry being a little bit more vulnerable and being a bit more authentic about the struggles, because I think as a restaurateur and industry person, you sort of put your brave face on. So you get into work in the morning and the toilet's blocked and you're going to do some accounting. Your cash flow is at the yang this week, but that service at night, you're still a smiling, happy face at the front door. I think industry vulnerability is a great thing right now.
Yeah, I do too. And you raise another interesting point at how a business owner in the restaurant industry is a marketing professional, is a financial professional, is a lease professional, HR professional, food professional. There's all these different disciplines, and if done right, it works. And not to make, for anybody listening to this, there's many great operators out there that know how to operate and make a business work. They're disciplined on their cost structure. They're disciplined on their menu offerings. And those are the ones that will come back and survive. If providing that we flush cash into the system, because it wasn't their fault they had to close. And I think there is a responsibility to put cash in their hands to make sure they can hold on for 3 months and get back to normal. Even looking at, we talked with the government, Shawn, about the word deferral. We wrote the premier that this happened. Jeff and I actually, and Ken Beater, the craft brewers, we wrote a letter and said to the premier, we need to defer this and defer that. And then now we're saying, we can't defer anything. You can't walk back in to open your business and go, boy, I owe all this money. I haven't paid my food supplier for my order from 3 months ago. So we have to figure that kind of stuff out. It is going to have to be in the way of grants. It is going to have to be in the way of cash injection or forgivable loans. But we can't load up this industry and say, well, the way to get through this, Shawn, is go get a loan. And then just max out your credit cards and do everything you can, and hopefully it's going to work out for you. It's not going to work out for you. We're just going to postpone the inevitable. So there's got to be a way to put unencumbered cash into the system that is going to allow you, and so it should be, to reopen your place and get going here and be back in society from a good employer point of view.
I know you're a busy man, so I don't want to take up much more of your time. But as a long game, I think a lot of people are asking me right now, like my clients and friends, restaurateurs and stuff, about like what the macro outlook is looking like, and I'm focusing on the micro things like turning inventory into cash flow and that sort of thing. As a president of an association as large and as expansive as yours, looking after so many people, what is the association's sort of standpoint on a long-term game plan to get a light at the end of the tunnel?
The short term is liquidity in cash, and the long term is to let these businesses be their businesses and have them with a very clear runway that's not interrupted. So they're not, we're going to have to be a little bit honest, I think, in terms of wages and those kinds of things, because we just can't keep leveraging business up to pay for those kinds of things. So it needs to be a long-term platform of leave them alone, let them be very disciplined and operating within, health, social policy, public policy for the betterment of that, but let them be. And, and when we say to government now, gee, property taxes are becoming a real issue, pay attention. Or, yes, we want to pay our employees, but you're going to have to let the market maybe decide that a bit more than you arbitrarily just saying we're going to put it to $15 on what, because you can't make that judgment now in Shawn's business. Only Shawn can make that judgment, because you have no idea what he's taken on here to reopen. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that. I think associations are not going to be membership based. I think they're going to have to be funded somehow through, if there's licensing schemes for liquor, maybe a portion of that goes to fund organizations. The organizations are needed, because there'd be chaos right now without them. But, am I going to send a bill for $350 to a restaurant saying, hey, I know you're having problems right now, but can you pay your invoice? Like, that's not going to work. So I see that's the long term, and I think it's going to be a really tight industry. I think it's going to be, restaurants. If you open a restaurant beside a guy on the same block that has a restaurant, they don't like each other. It's competition taken away from me. You're going to see a lot more collaboration. You're going to see a lot more honesty, whereas, you ask a restaurateur how's it going, is no problems, right? Well, that he's got problems, but it's a pride factor. But you're going to see much more honesty and collaboration, and I think we'll be able to build a foundation that's a lot more solid and able to withstand the next crisis that we have invariably down the road. It was a bit jerry-rigged, to be quite honest with you, Shawn. And I think that this will, as you say, a great word is going to reset it all on a much more solid footing.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I know that you're in and out of meetings and you're doing so much work, and I appreciate yourself and BCRFA and everything that you guys have done in the past, but really putting the mechanisms in place now to make it all happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This has been a bit philosophical, but that's kind of what it is, because you're trying to, as someone said, there's nothing in the last 100 years that's prepared any of us for this. And as I said to our team, we will be judged, and you will look back, and I want you to look over your shoulder in time and say, you know what, we did the greatest job we could for industry to get them stable, because that's our responsibility right now. And we will. That commitment is, that is our commitment, and that's our job. We have to get that job done. I will say BCRFA.com is a great resource for people that want to go. It's updated literally every hour. in terms of, what the business owner needs to do to take care of himself and his staff. And I can be reached. My cell number is 604-986-1429. If anybody needs to talk to me personally, we can handle it. We've got HR, an advisor to help businesses through that side. So I think we got it all covered. Just, I really ask industry to reach out and ask us for the help that they invariably need.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, Post Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.